Hey folks, welcome to Project Next. The next thing we're going to resurrect from the dead. This time it's going to be a Radio Shack Trs-80 Model 4D. This is the later unit than the original Model 4. I have an original Model 4 right there that I've taken apart so we can do a little comparison between the two motherboards. But this one, just like everything else I work on, hasn't been run in decades. And in the meantime, it's turned into the coolest bird nest that you could possibly find. I do have the floppy drives, and I've already aligned those separately, so hopefully that one item will be able to be just plugged in. But of course, this thing is filthy as heck. It's missing its upper keyboard shield cover, and it's dirty as all these things always are by this time. So let's pull the cover off and take a gander at the motherboard and take a look at the differences. Boy, this thing is filled with, well, they turned it into a bird high-rise. It's pretty much what it was. But pretty much everything in here other than the keyboard has been changed. Of course, the tube is the same, the CRT, but the driver board right there is different than the original. The power supply, excuse me, let me try to fit you in here. The power supply is almost the same, but the big difference is the motherboard. This is the one for the Model 4D. Now the original, bring you up here, the original had three separate boards. You have the motherboard here, you have the floppy driver board back behind the shield, this mounting shield where the cable went to, and it had another board here for the serial output and input. And they were connected to the motherboard with those two ribbon cables, and the ports come out the bottom. You've got a printer port here. Behind it is the port for the external floppy drive. You've got the hard drive port here, and behind that you can feel the output for the serial port. Now, the newer model, now that one was made from 81 to 83. But they made quite a bit of change to the Model 4D. The biggest change is everything's on the board. The serial port and the floppy controller are all integrated directly to the motherboard. There are no extra. The casing is the same, and there's even a place to mount them. There's simply nothing there needed to be mounted. And as you can see, there's no place to connect any ribbons at the top. That's unnecessary. The Z80 chip, notice that one's missing. That's going to be the first thing we put in. That might speed things up if you want to see it turned on. But other than that, everything else appears to be intact. Now, port-wise, there's some changes. Now, right there, that's the connection for the floppy ribbon cable that connects to the two floppy drives. Below it is the output for an external floppy that comes out the bottom, like it did before, but behind it there's a slot that's unnecessary because there's nothing there. Right here is the output port for the serial. It's facing outward, making it much more useful than facing straight down, which was just crazy. We still have the 50-pin hard drive port coming out the bottom right there, and over here is the printer port. Still have a cassette port coming out the back. And other than that, things are mostly the same. You still got the brightness and contrast controls that are laying right there. Still going the same place they used to, right there. The keyboard's pretty much the same. And that's pretty much it in the differences. The case is exactly the same. All the chips, of course, have been moved around on the board to make space for the floppy controller and the serial port, but it's still run by the Z80 microprocessor up here in the corner. The other one was somewhere in the middle. You still got a port for an external graphics card, but instead of being over here, which it is on the Model 4 original, right there, it's now moved up to here. But other than that, everything is pretty much the same, and it of course functions exactly the same. But the first thing we're going to do is the same thing we always do. This thing is going to have a really big bath. And the first thing we're going to do is take out the bird nest. Wow, look at that. I don't know. I hope the family was successful. That's all I say. Actually, I had this sitting up in the rafters for a few years, hoping I would have time to get to it, and somewhere in the interim, a bird decided to use squatter rights and try to move in. Holy cow. Of course, we're going to have to vacuum the rest of this. Yeah, at least the keyboard cable appears to be intact. And it doesn't look damaged, that's good. Power switch lines, floppy drive cables, that's good. Everything seems to be in good condition, just so dirty you're afraid to ask. No keys missing? No, what am I talking about? Number 1's missing. But that should be easy enough to remedy. Connection for the CRT driver board. All these connections appear good. Nothing broken. Nothing missing. That's good. Good to see. Everything's solid, not rusting. Well, we're going to have to hit this thing with a vacuum. Cleanup has revealed my first problem. Look at that great chip right out of that board. Luckily, it doesn't really seem to affect any more than, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 3 lines if I'm lucky, maybe 4. I'll have to run some bodge wires from over here to, let's see, looks like they all run over here somewhere to the keys here. That's really not going to be a problem, and luckily that break doesn't affect the strength of the keyboard. Well, for one thing, it's on a metal shield, so something had to have hit that. And that's a shame, but easily repaired. Looks like a lot of corrosion here. Hey, we're going to run into a lot of stuff. These things are going to have to be cleaned like crazy. No matter how much I vacuum, there's still leaves stuck under here, stuck under that board. The keyboard's going to require quite a bit of work. Look at the, man, look at the bottom, the corrosion on the bottom of here. That's beautiful. I have to take all those keys off just to see what's going on. But hey, that's all part of it, isn't it? Alright, I know I'm going to disassemble this thing all the way down to the bottom board. It's the only way I'm going to clean it. Everything's going to completely come out, and I'm just going to have to hose that bottom plate out. It's filthy. It looks like the whole thing's been in the bottom of a pond. But hey, let's take a shot. I threw the Z80 processor into the empty socket, and I've checked all the connections, plugged everything in, make sure there was nothing obviously shorted together, and I thought, well, let's just turn it on and see what happens. See if there's any life in it whatsoever. Oh, I also took out the reefer cap before it blew. A little preemptive maintenance. Well, let's see what happens. hear a click. The drive's spinning up, but there's no light. Oh, look at this. This thing actually works. That's fantastic. Look at that screen. It's clear. Well, this shows a whole lot is working. Right off the bat, it shows that the motherboard is working just fine because it boots up. The picture tube and the CRT driver board is great. I mean, that's a clear picture. There's no artifacts. There's no look how clear that those letters are. That's fantastic. It's a great screen. I love a green CRT. And also, since there's no odd artifacts, it apparently boots up properly. There's no freaking out. There's no lost in space there. So a whole lot of this is working. Looks like the only thing that's a problem, I can tell, there's no activity light on the drive. But you know, also noticed that the floppy controller chip and a couple of chips around it have some corrosion on them. So I'm going to take them out and clean them up. Maybe that'll even take care of that. But I'm still going to take everything out of this bottom plate. And of course the keyboard is absolutely filthy. That's going to take quite a while. I'm going to take all the keys off, try to clean up all the connections, and I've got to jumper those circuits that have been broken off from that board. Cleaned up. Is it absolute perfection? No, but it's a whole lot better than it was. And I uncovered a build date. Look at this. Here we go. June 6th, 1985. Wow. Okay, well, we can do some minor reassembly next. Power supply, I know I can replace the caps, but so far they look really good. There's no bulging, there's no leaking. I got rid of the thing that everybody knows is going to cause trouble, and that was the main reefer cap. So get rid of that little leg that's still there. So we're going to go with this. I've got some other systems I've had for running for 24/7 for quite a while, and the capacitors have held. If they go, then I'll replace them. one thing I do to make sure, I've taken out a couple of the chips that I thought had some corrosion on it, hoping that that might fix the problem with the floppy drive controller, because it's the floppy controller chip. But I'm hitting several that are here in the sockets. And one way I found, now everybody I know cleans the socket with some deoxide or electronic circuit cleaner, scrub it with a toothbrush, that's the socket. But a much better way for the chip itself and the legs is a sanding block. Just do this. It's a whole lot easier than a piece of sandpaper if you were trying something like that. And it's nice and gentle, and they come out very, very clean. So, little tip. It always seems to work for me. Alright, that's in there. I'm going to try one more. I don't like the look of this one. You'd get a little rough too if you haven't been used in decades, huh? One more. There we go. Shiny. Not bad. Get this one a little more too. A little oxidation on you after 35 years, huh? Make sure it's aimed the right way. That's always good, isn't it? Everything works. I've got a little bonus for this little computer. I bought it for another one, realized I ordered the wrong one, so I realized it will fit in this one, so that's good. Okay, I'm going to tell you what joy I've been having with this keyboard. Once I got the computer running, I realized there was only two keys that were still working, the reset button and the number 5. I might make a joke about number 5 being alive, but since a bunch of you probably don't know that 80s reference, I'd have to say, you kids get off my lawn. But what I'm having to do is desolder every switch from the keyboard, disassemble the key, clean it, reassemble, resolder it back onto the board. It's been a joy. I've got these 3 rows already done. I still got to do these, this, and the keypad. But I'll give you an example of what it's been like. First, I do a row at a time. That way the keycaps are not in the way of the next switch to be done. This is my bodge wire that I put in to get the keys working, and then I realized none of the keys worked anyway. But the wire is working well. So, I'm going to have to desolder every one of these. I'm sure I'll put you on fast motion so this won't bore you to tears. First, I want to make sure that all 4 pins of a switch are loose, because you start yanking and something will get torn up, and then you realize, oh shoot, it wasn't really desoldered completely. So make sure you can move the legs. Here we go. Okay, all 4 move. Now, there we go. Yeah, I've been doing that for 3 whole rows. If you like a job in extreme tedium, well, this is the job for you. Okay, here's the switch. Now we got to disassemble it carefully. There. All right. Now, I don't know if you can see that. It'll focus. You can see that's corroded down there. That's why that key wasn't working. So, first, we'll take a file. I've got these electrical connection files. Gets down into small spaces that just other tools can't. Hit those 2 contact points really well, because they really just hit those studs, but I'm still going to clean this a little more than the other ones were. My can of deoxit here. Don't worry, I'm here. I'm just cleaning close to my face and away from the camera. It's still not... See, I can still see stuff around those studs. So I'm going to use my tiny tweezers, and I'm just going to carefully try to scrape around those studs, because even though the studs are clean, the corrosion will recontaminate the carbon button. It doesn't take much for that carbon button to be contaminated and stop working. A lot of these switches looked perfectly fine, but I'll show you what needs to be done. And so far, every single one of them works. I'm going to say that's about as good as we can get it. But the other key point to this is the little carbon button. See if that'll focus on top of the little key dome here, the little rubber key dome. Now here's what you do. This is contaminated. This will not work. I've got a sanding sponge, something you'd usually use for drywall, and I'm going to go over top of that, and I'm talking carefully. I'm just literally just using no force. It's like I'm combing hair or something. It's just going over the top, and what I'm doing, it's really taking the topmost layer off of the carbon button. See the little black spots? You keep doing it. Every button, because of age, will have 2 shiny spots where those studs were. And you just very carefully, slowly go over it until you don't see those shiny spots anymore, and then you know you've gone far enough. Do not use a lot of force. If you get rid of the carbon off of this little plunger, this key is destroyed. You'd never be able to use it again. And now we reassemble it. Spring. There we go. Ready to be put back in the keyboard. Make sure the legs are straight before you start. Might as well clean around that spot. For one thing, clean the key and around the spot, because once you start getting through here, you can start losing track of which ones you've done, and this way the clean one will be the one you just finished. Put the key in, line it up so you can see the legs, give it a little push until you hear it click, and there we go. Now all we have to do is solder it back in. Yes, I know my soldering iron is large and clunky, but it's my old one. And it works, so whatever. There you go. That's one key repaired. One full row, one partial row, and the entire keypad to go. I'll bring you back when it's done and we test out the keyboard. Alright, we finally have progress. Fixing the keyboard was a nightmare I do not wish to repeat. It's taken hours to fix some of the keys that refuse to be fixed. But I finally got a working keyboard. Before, all there was the number 5. As you can see, I now have an enter key. How about that? All the keys work. Alright, now we can actually communicate with the daggone thing. Now, the next step is the fact that when you turn it on with a drive in it, it comes up and powers up the drive. It knows it's there because it asks for a diskette, but that's all it does. The head doesn't move, so that's our next step. Oh, and I managed to get something that's going to make this quite a bit better looking. A little eBay purchase. Oh, what a difference. Okay, about to button this thing up after an error that I've had for a while that I haven't recorded about. It's just that it wouldn't boot from the disk, and I kept thinking that it couldn't have been the drives themselves, because they had already been aligned. I knew they worked in another system that I've got. Tried them out, they both work great. But it would not boot. But it acted like it was contacting it. So I tested out, there's the floppy drive controller chip. I tested signals coming in. I tested signals going out. Everything was working the way it was supposed to. So it finally hit me that there's a third thing that affects it when the thing boots that I hadn't been checking, and that's the quality of the memory. The memory was bad. I haven't found out which chip. If I'm lucky, it might be one, so I can save the rest. But what I've got in here now is I cannibalized the memory from my other Model 4 and put it in here to test it, and it booted right up. And it works perfectly. So I'm keeping the memory in here. I've already ordered some memory because I was temporarily out to replace in the other unit. I did not have a cable, a floppy drive cable for a gate array Model 4 because they're much longer than the ones that are non-gate array. So I got some ends and I made a cable, so that looks nice. And I even had one of Ian's modern graphics cards that I'd ordered, and I was hoping to get one of these working well that I could stick it in. The other one's a non-gate array, and I couldn't put it in there, but I can put in this, and it works great. So now I have high-resolution graphics on a system that I've never seen it actually myself before. So let's button it up, and I'll let you take a look. Okay, here we go. I love a green monitor. No burn-in, super crisp. It looks great. Check the second drive, make sure the cable works well. It does. And hey, let's test the graphics card. Doesn't that look great? Especially for the year that this was made in. This is not bad. Well, it's clean. The keyboard is repaired for here. Like I said, it has some bad keys. I had some that I just could not repair. I put them over here, and I'll replace them when I can, but the main keyboard is completely working again. Both floppies. It's clean, inside and out, and it works great. So that's probably going to be the end of this one, except for a boring thing of replacing those keys on the keypad. And it's going to be on to the next project, which I've got coming up real soon. Thanks for watching.